Thank you. And it's great to be here on the topic of the eco experience. Of course, the Department of Commerce will be at that booth as well. And we jointly staff with our partner CERTS, which is doing a lot of Inflation Reduction Act education. So I am excited and look forward to seeing you all there. And we'll see you during my stints. We've all been signing up. So can't remember what days I'll be there, but excited for it. So thanks for having me. My name is Pete Wyckoff. I am the Assistant Commissioner for Federal and State Energy Initiatives at the Department of Commerce. It's a very long title, but basically I am new to the position. I've been here 3.5 months. The position is new, and one of my charges is leading a big team that is told to go after all the money that we can that's available from the federal government to speed along Minnesota's clean energy transition. So I know Jack from Commerce is here too. He is one of the amazing lieutenants in this in this campaign. Just a little bit about the Department of Commerce. Division of Energy Resources. Minnesota, as probably a bunch of you know, doesn't have a separate energy department. Effectively, what is the energy department is located within the larger commerce umbrella. Within that commerce umbrella, we are called the Division of Energy Resources. We have a deputy commissioner who runs it. And then we have sort of two sides of the house. We have a regulatory side, and that is another assistant commissioner. And then we have essentially energy affordability and energy development side. And that's the side that I'm the assistant commissioner for. And as a whole, DER, we have a mandate and a mission to promote clean, reliable, and affordable energy. And we do some telecom too, but I don't know as much about that for Minnesota. Minnesota has some big climate goals. We have a climate action framework. I'm new back to the state. I am a Minnesotan, but I've only been back here for 3.5 months. The climate action framework came out last fall, and it is the guide for how we as a state are going to get to a net zero economy by 2050. The climate framework includes near-term actions that will add up to the long-term achievement of our goals, to be carbon-free, to be resilient, and to have an energy system that is more equitable. Within the climate framework, there are focuses on transportation and working lands and communities and health and a clean economy. Where commerce comes in is we are leaders for the state on clean energy and energy efficiency. So clean energy and efficient buildings. And in that clean energy and efficient buildings, we have some very tangible targets. I think many or probably all of you know that the legislature passed a law. So it's not just a target, it's a law. This last session that says Minnesota will have a carbon-free electric sector by 2040. There's a lot of work to do there, and Commerce will be helping to lead that transition. Also, we have a state goal that by 2030, we will weatherize 1/4 of the dwellings. So we're going to get our homes more efficient. And the state's role is to work on making sure that dwellings where occupants earn less than 50% of the state median income, that we get half of those weatherized by 2030. Also a Commerce-led goal, by 2035, we are aiming to reduce emissions from existing buildings by 50% compared to one of the standard benchmarks, which is 2005. So Minnesota has big climate plans. federal government is here to help, which is a weird thing to say, I know. But one of the things the federal government has done is they sent me. Until recently, I worked in Washington. I was a energy advisor and climate advisor to both Senator Al Franken and then Senator Tina Smith. I was with Tina Smith through her whole run and left at the 5-year mark earlier this year. So in that position and working with an amazing senator, I was able to have a first-hand front row view to the sort of amazing climate legislation that got done at the federal level in the last Congress, not in the current Congress. Minnesota is where the action's happening in the current legislature. The feds were where the action was happening in the last legislature. So in what I'm talking about today in terms of things that are federally available to help with our transition, I was a witness. So that was really the honor of a lifetime. Last Congress, there were 3 very large pieces of legislation that passed that have climate implications. The first was the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. That is a huge, and as the name implies, piece of legislation that passed with both Democrats and Republicans that included in its infrastructure investments billions of dollars in investments in the energy system. That was followed by something called the CHIPS and Science Act, which funds a lot of science research related to making sure we have the climate and energy breakthroughs we need. And then came the big piece of climate legislation, something oddly named the Inflation Reduction Act. And that passed almost a year ago at the end of 2022. Despite the name, Inflation Reduction Act, what it really is the biggest climate action law ever adopted by a government anywhere in the world. Research recently out in Science magazine says the incentives that I'll describe today in the Inflation Reduction Act should drop economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions in the United States 43 to 48% by 2035. Most of that is because of accelerated clean energy deployment because of these incentives. I'm a nerd and I like to, to look at graphs. To be fair, what we see here is reduction in economy-wide emissions. And the standard international benchmark for where you measure from for a variety of reasons is 2005. The US has actually been getting more efficient in term and reducing emissions since 2005. It's been a up and down, but a decline. What we were worried about and was a real threat, and this is the light blue scenarios here, is that those improvements were going to plateau. And what the Inflation Reduction Act with its incentives does is put us back on the pathway for continued progress. Not all the way to net zero, but again, halfway, hopefully, at least, to the goal of net zero from where we started in 2005. So it puts us on a path of maybe 40% reductions by 2030. And it does that through only basically carrots, no sticks. So if we're going to get there through carrots, a bunch of incentives, we got to get folks at every scale adopting those incentives. What form do those incentives come? They come in 3 packages. The first is there are grants. It's not the big part of the IRA. There's about $110 billion over 10 years in grants, and I'll talk a little more about those grants in a minute, in the IRA. But that's only the first bucket. The second bucket, which I'll also briefly mention, is that there is included in the IRA approximately $500 billion in loan authority for the federal government to give out very large loans to help speed the transition to a cleaner, low emission environment. The last piece, which is the biggest piece, are tax credits. We've long, and I'll talk more about this, pushed clean energy via tax incentives. That's been the preferred method for the federal government. But these are not your grandpa's tax incentives. These are souped up on steroids tax incentives, and I'll spend some time with them. Estimates of how much those tax incentives we use range from $700 billion to over $1 trillion of expected tax incentive activity, driven activity over the next 10 years. I'll talk a lot more about this, but one of the things that is revolutionary is these tax credits are, for the most part, what is called direct pay, which means the non-taxed entities. So these are not for individuals, the direct pay, but for non-taxed entities like local governments, the state itself, tribes, and nonprofits, these tax credits are usable, and the IRS will just send you a check. So I want to pause and see if there's any immediate questions, and then I'm going to talk about each of those bins a little bit. Then I'm going to end with how the state action in the last legislation has supercharged the environment in which we will try to use these incentives, and then we can have a just free-ranging discussion for the rest of the time. But any questions thus far? All right, let's dive in. So the first pot, again, the smallest of the pots, and it's not going to get any bigger because it's fixed, is IRA grants. I just want to give you a sense of what some of these are. A lot of them are in agriculture. I'm not going to talk about that. I mostly just focus on energy stuff. But there are several big pots in the energy and environmental justice area that I want to mention. One is something called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, also known as the Green Bank money. And that is a $27 billion pot of money that will fund financing institutions that will then fund projects in the clean energy and climate space. Of that $27 billion, most of it's going to set up some national green banks, 2 or 3, that will then lend to projects all across the country. But $7 billion of that $27 billion is going to a program called Solar for All. And the Solar for All will be given out 60 of them, so roughly 1 per state. And Commerce is leading the Minnesota application for Solar for All. It is exclusively reserved for spending that will increase solar energy through roof or small distributed solar projects that has to be aimed at low and moderate income Americans. So Minnesota Department of Commerce is getting ready to tell the federal government, hey, we're leading for Minnesota. We will be putting in, on behalf of ourselves, a couple other agencies, and a bunch of other stakeholders, $100 to $200 million grant proposal related to low to moderate income solar sometime in the fall. There's another big pot of money called climate pollution reduction grants. Minnesota's going after that money too. It's $5 billion for states and tribes to reduce greenhouse gas pollution. And you'll note this is going to be a theme focused on low income and disadvantaged communities. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency is leading out there. Another grant program I'll just mention is the Neighborhood Access and Equity Grants. Those are going to be grants for trails and improving walkability and developing sort of projects that undo environmental impacts in communities, including a large chunk that will go to things like the proposed Rondo Reconnect. I don't know if that will be specifically where it goes, where communities are trying to undo injustice in the past and make a community that is fairer, more just, and ready to move on into a low carbon future. I'll mention one more grant because it's my favorite. The IRA gave a large chunk of money to the post office. Earlier this year, the post office announced that they were using that money in part to defray the costs of their next big purchase of trucks. They have ordered 100,000 trucks. 66,000 of them will be electric. That's a big turnaround for previous plans. It is a big upping of we are electrifying the post office fleet. And the post office also announced they do not anticipate any additional gas-powered purchases going forward beyond this purchase they just put in an order for. And that was all made possible on the electric side from $3 billion in IRA grant money. So that's all good stuff. But that's not the big stuff. In terms of actual money available, the next biggest, the much bigger and next second largest pot is going to be in loans. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but these are not small loans. These are going to be loans that tend to be of $100 million or larger to utilities, to companies, to states going through their own green bank to do very large projects that will reduce emissions. I am very pleased that the head of the DOE Loan Program Office, a man named Jigar Shah, who some of you might know, is visiting Minnesota next Monday and Tuesday, and he's here to drum up business for the office that gives out these loans. So it's going to be an exciting time, and I'm hoping that visit will spark a lot of activity in Minnesota that will lead to some of that money coming here. We should be trying to get $10–20 billion out of this project, or out of this pot for our state. The third bucket, and the biggest one, as I mentioned, are tax credits. They are uncapped. I just like this illustration, so I am going to throw it out there, but there are tax credits that are aimed at individuals. A bunch of them are for things about your home and your life. There are tax credits for electric vehicles. There are tax credits for electrifying your house, adding an induction stove, adding a heat pump water heater, adding a heat pump, putting on rooftop solar. These are individual tax credits. As someone asked me right before I start, what about the rebates? A last grant program that I'll mention that will be administered by the Department of Commerce will be for very large house deep retrofit rebates and for electrification rebates for these same things that get tax credits. That rebate program will be run by the Department of Commerce when it gets up and running, probably early next year. And that will be income limited. So it's only for low and moderate income Minnesotans, but we're very excited about that rebate program, which will be on top of the tax credits that are available to any individual, no matter what their income is. So there's a bunch of tax credits. They're going to be available for you and your home. You can get tax credits that will offset 30% of the cost of getting a home battery or geothermal heating or rooftop solar. They're complicated, but there's a federal tax credit for new electric vehicles that's worth up to $7,500, and for used electric vehicles that's worth up to $4,000. You can get a tax credit for home vehicle chargers, for heat pumps, for heat pump water heaters, for electric panel upgrades, and for weatherization and insulation. So hopefully these incentives will drive a lot of individual homeowners to do a lot of these sort of emission reducing activities. And as I mentioned, it's going to be income limited, but bigger than the tax credits are these rebates. There will be up to $4,000 available for electric panel upgrades. Again, it's income limited. Money for induction stoves, for upgrading your electric wiring, for heat pump water heaters, for heat pumps themselves, for heat pump clothes dryers, and for insulation projects. Individual qualified homeowners can obviously, through claiming all of these rebates, get a fairly substantial contribution towards decarbonizing their home and their lives. Most of the tax credit money, though, is not aimed at individuals. Most of it is the federal government greatly expanding sort of commercial and utility scale clean energy tax credits. Federal government has long done tax incentives to drive first wind that goes all the way back through the pollution or production tax credit that was adopted in 1992. And then solar was added later with what's called the solar investment tax credit. So the ITC has been for solar. You get a tax credit that's taken up front on the upfront cost of building something, and a production for wind, which pays based on how much electricity the wind turbine actually generates. So we've done that for a while. It's back with a vengeance in the IRA. The ITC and the PTC, the investment tax credit and the production tax credit, are still the big drivers, but they've been greatly expanded. Either wind or solar can now claim either the ITC or the PTC. Standalone energy storage projects can now claim the investment tax credit, and the investment tax credit's also been expanded to include geothermal, fuel cells, biomass, landfill gas, hydropower, chip or combined heat and power. Again, this is not at the individual homeowner level, but this is at the commercial to utility scale. The IRS has also added tax credits to support all sorts of clean electric generation. That includes tax credits for nuclear electricity, tax credits for fossil fuel produced electricity if accompanied by carbon capture and storage, tax credits for clean hydrogen, advanced biofuels, and a large new program for sustainable aviation fuel. There are lots of tax credits out there now for transportation. I've already mentioned there's an individual tax credit for new electric vehicles and for used electric vehicles, but now there are more generous tax credits for commercial and fleet clean vehicles and for clean refueling equipment like EV chargers. There's also a whole bunch of tax credits out there to drive onshoring and build out of the American supply chains and manufacturing capability for the clean energy economy. And we've already seen those tax credits being used. In Fridley, Cummins just opened a line to produce electrolyzers, which are needed to make clean hydrogen. Yeah. And up in Mountain Iron, we have a very large expansion of a solar module facility driven by these IRA tax credits. And we're hoping to get a lot more. These tax credits are available for, by the way these tax credits go, which have tended to come and go for a sustained period. They're available for the next 9 years. For the electric sector, the tax credits are actually available, the main tax credits, until the electric sector as a country, as a whole, is producing less than 25% of the emissions it produced last year. So they'll be around for a while. Projects can stack these federal grants, these loans, and these tax credits all on the same project. They just can't claim 2 tax credits on a given project, but it's a sort of tsunami of incentives. And as I mentioned before, the big new twist is that most of these are available with direct pay which allows tax-exempt entities to use tax credits. So this means that states and counties and townships and cities and tribes and nonprofits and faith communities and nonprofit utilities and other governmental entities, groups that have never thought, hey, I should be in the clean energy business, now should think about it because they can get a direct pay tax credit. It gets better. These tax credits can be huge. And they do that by stacking what are called attributes. A hypothetical example. I want to build a megawatt of solar. This is not an unrealistic price, so Jack Company can tell me maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to pay about $1 million for that. If I do it right, the federal government can pick up to 70% of the tab. If I'm a tax-exempt entity, I can get it as a direct cash payment. How do I get up to 70%? Well, there's a base tax credit that's only worth 6% of that solar project's value. Ho-hum. But if I make sure that the jobs associated with building that installation are good jobs, paying union wages, the tax credit goes up to 30%. If I build my tax-supported megawatt of solar in what's called an energy community, and then it's broadly defined as communities that have been dependent on fossil fuel and old pre-transition energy infrastructure, or any community that has what's called a brownfield, an area that for pollution reasons is hard to develop, you can get an additional 10%. So now we're up to 40% for our tax credit. And you can mix and match. If you build with American domestic content, so stuff that's made in America, you can drive it up to 50%. If you then say, this project is supporting specifically low-income Americans, low-income Minnesotans, there are 2 levels, but you can get a 10 to 20% bonus for that. If you do a project that meets all of these attributes, that's 70% of the project being picked up by the federal government. That's a pretty powerful tax credit. Of course, Minnesota looked at the federal government and said, hey, when you had a trifecta by a particular party, you got a lot of climate legislation done. Well, Minnesota now has that same trifecta. And the results were exhibited in the last legislative session that concluded not all that long ago. What I'm showing here, and I don't want you to read it, is all the programs that are being stood up at the Department of Commerce related to clean energy and climate, resulting from actions taken in the last legislative session. It got a lot of press. We're doing a lot. We're following the lead that the feds did 2 years ago, in the previous 2 years. This is a more readable, but still, I don't want to overwhelm you, but these are the programs the top programs we are standing up in commerce. Jack can testify that I run around with a glazed look on my face all the time because of this action we're doing. But we are standing up programs that will help reduce emissions from residential. We're setting up a bunch of solar programs. We're doing programs related to storage. Minnesota is going to have its own electric vehicle rebate program that can stack on top of the federal rebates. We are getting in the business of electric school buses. We're doing other things related to the clean energy transition, and it is funded like it has never been funded before at the state level. It's a really exciting time. Wait, there's more. The largesse of the legislature just keeps going on. In commerce, that means that we got 2 things we're really excited about that we're standing up. We got something called the State Competitiveness Fund. And this is specifically a fund to encourage the use of the federal incentives I've been talking about. So in that state competitiveness fund, we have $100 million for matching funds for institutions that are going after and receiving federal grants. And then grants to leverage these tax credits and loans, the other two buckets I've been talking about. Those are going to focus just on disadvantaged communities. The final thing I'll mention is that Minnesota is standing up its own green bank. Commerce is sort of in loco parentis for that green bank now, but in due time, it will be under its own board of directors. And that is an institution that can work to leverage, for instance, these large federal loans that are available, bring those to Minnesota, and we can do a lot of open field running with billions of dollars to invest in our clean energy transition. I'm tired. It's been a long day. I may not sound excited, but every time I talk about this, I just feel really, really excited. So I'll stop there. And let's see if we can have something of a conversation.
Yeah, this is great, Pete. Wow, this is amazing. Just one quick question I've got. A lot of it has to do with energy, of course. How are the utilities reacting to this? Some people have said they're concerned that the utilities won't be able to keep up with all this change.
Well, I mean, so that is a question that both sides of the Division of Energy Resources are thinking hard about. The Public Utilities Commission has a open docket to talk about how the utilities are going to be working on making sure they are taking advantage of the IRA incentives. I will be testifying at the PUC this coming Thursday as part of that docket. So it is something we are thinking hard about how we can help the utilities. And, you know, I think there will be a lot of, the utilities are already going to be needing to do a lot because we have this 2040 law. And to be fair, we have nation-leading utilities in their climate commitments, and you know, that's a really proud spot for the electric sector for Minnesota, even before the law and before these incentives. But the law and these incentives will, well, the law will turbocharge and get us to that endpoint that we all agree we need to get to. The incentives can help pay for that transition to a cleaner electric sector that won't have fuel costs, will be cheaper to run, and or at least have greatly reduced fuel costs. And there are clean fuels that do have fuel costs, but also that, you know, leads to air in Minnesota that is healthier and leads to lower medical expenses. There are just, and leads to lower environmental damage. There's just many axes by which this will pay not only just moral, ethical, however you want to think it, dividends, but financial dividends. So.
Let's go ahead with questions. I'm sure there's plenty of them. And if people will just use their reaction button and raise their hand, we can start going down through the list.
And we first, I want to call Jack out on the spot and say, hey, you're also here from the Department of Commerce. What did I miss, or what do you want to add?
Well, I don't think you could cover everything that's in here in this short a period of time. I mean, there is a lot. There are a couple questions in the chat that you might want to take care of. I think from my perspective right now, just have a little patience with us. We're really lifting up a lot of stuff. And so sure. When you got questions, please be patient. We're getting to it.
The first thing I see in the chat, I don't know how you want to do this. Doug,
go ahead.
Do you want to go to people raising their hands or go to the chat?
Well, why don't you take like one out of each side, Pete?
Okay. The first question I see is are we doing enough to ensure that our power grid will have sufficient capacity to electrify our state? That's going to be a challenge. I think there's no way around it. And, Commerce is thinking about it hard. The utilities are thinking about it hard. The PUC is thinking about it hard. But everybody knows that one key to a cleaner future, driven a lot by beneficial electrification and by relying pretty heavily on the electric sector, is going to be an expansion of our transmission system, figuring out how to do distributed energy that isn't reliant on long distance transmission and storage. Jack, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, there are a number of projects to build up transmission. Quite a few on making distribution hubs more efficient. And a lot of these are distributed. So as we distribute it away from the large transmission lines, we depend less on the transmission line. But yeah, transmission is a big key.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know if it's the first hand up or whether I'm just seeing in some alphabetical order, but I'm seeing a Gary.
Yeah, that'll be me.
All right.
I have a couple of questions, and one is I'm part of a small organization that's trying to get my city, the city of Hopkins, to build a solar garden within our city limits. We've got a couple of sites. One is a landfill, former landfill.
Brownfield that gets the extra bonus on the tax credit.
And a parking ramp that's about an acre. So what's been preventing us to work on either of these, one factor is the extra infrastructure to build a canopy. Is that infrastructure going to be included in any of these programs?
It's been a long day, and that's a good question. How much of the, I believe, you don't have to be building your solar panels on the ground. So yes, I don't know what you mean by the canopy. Like, do you need a very large structure on top of that?
Right.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. And the other thing is, are these applications open right now for cities and nonprofits to start applying?
So if you're talking about the tax credits, the answer is no. But they will be soon. So the IRS has put out draft rules for how the direct pay tax credits, which will be what cities will use, will be run. We are in a comment period. There will be revised and then finalized rules. The other thing I'll point out is you said the word apply. It's a tax credit. You don't have to apply. It's kind of like a grant you just get.
Oh, after the fact.
Yep.
Okay.
So that is an important thing. The tax credits are only available as a direct payment after the project has been completed. So there will need to be bridge and construction loans, potentially. There will be financing hurdles, and some of these new financing structures will be able to help with those. And when I say you don't have to apply, cities and other nonprofits that are not currently in the tax system will have to do a basic registration as part of an anti-fraud protection, but it's not the same as applying, because you're going to get the tax credit with a couple, if we get really in the weeds, exceptions of things where you have a little more hoop to jump through. But unlike, hey, I don't have the capacity to do giant grants, and in Commerce we actually have money to help with capacity building too. But unlike applying for grants, the paperwork, not to say the filing taxes is easy paperwork, but I think filing taxes is actually easier than applying for a grant.
That's been my experience. Yes.
Right. I'm not. So there are things worse than filing your taxes.
I've worked or spoken to people who have actually created solar gardens. And their biggest issue is trying to get Excel to connect them. And I'm just wondering, I'm sure it's probably its own conference to get somebody from Excel to explain why it's so difficult for them, and what the requirements are to do it. So
interconnection issues are a huge rate limiting step.
Right.
I'm sure Jack has much long opinions about that, and I don't think we want to get into them. But yes, there are other challenges. The transmission is like a big scale challenge but interconnection is like a small scale challenge of like, how do we get things hooked into the grid in a way that works?
Right. So. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, Pete, why don't you grab one out of the chat?
What is the best way we can help you at Commerce to make the IRA and state funding reach its optimal impact? That's going to be our challenge, is how do we engage with folks as we stand up all of these programs. I'm going to say check our website a lot and watch this space as we start to roll these programs out. There will be opportunity for stakeholder input as we develop these programs. So look for that as well. Depending on, I don't know, what would you say, Jack? Patience, I think you've already said. Part of it is patience. We're rolling these things out, and we want you to participate as an individual and as part of the organizations you are part of. And we will be standing up a lot.
I would also say, if you know people who are mission driven, so to speak, and smart people who are looking for awesome opportunity to be at the table, we are hiring. Lots of different positions. Just on my team alone, it's 17 new staff people we need to hire to stand this all up. So
I will say that the Energy Development Office, Jack runs one of the units there, and the Energy Affordability Office. So the two offices that report up to me collectively are hiring 50 people. The Energy Development Office is basically doubling in size. So this has been a challenge at the federal level, and this is part of why it's taken basically 2 years to do the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And we're a year into the IRA. It's just starting to hit its stride. We're Minnesotans, we'll be faster than that. But we also need patience, because you can't go from passing the legislation instantly to having everything deployed maximally.
Yeah. Chris, why don't you go ahead next?
I'm busy writing a bunch of them in the chat. Here's I'll read them from the chat. Is how do you say it? Jigar Shah?
Jigar Shah, yeah.
Jigar Shah. Will he be he's the big loan guy, you said.
He's the big loan guy, yeah.
Does that mean across the country?
Yes.
Okay, so will he just be handing out grants?
He's not handing out grants. He's very big loans. So
yeah, very big loans.
To get to individuals, it's going to take a lot of sort of action.
But I mean, are they coordinated across states? Because like North Dakota suing Minnesota, right, for going 100%. So, and they win. They, the last time they actually won, I forgot what it was now, but, and they, I worked on exhibits in North Dakota. They wouldn't even put renewable energy exhibits in their new science museum. So how do you coordinate our neighbors, so that these projects are interstate or coordinated, overlapping, complementary? So for the, like somebody said, the biggest impact. So the biggest impact is if we're all on the same page.
Right. I think the IRA was built in a way, and I know the IRA was built in a way to try to help every state proceed in this decarbonization in a way that culturally and economically works for them. The kind of projects North Dakota chooses to do might not be the exact same kind of projects that Minnesota chooses to do. I guarantee you both states will be tapping into this federal money, moving in a decarbonizing direction because of it.
All right. And I was wondering also, I'm going to just grab a couple while I'm at it. Along with the IRA incentives, these carrots you're talking about, is there any way the Fed might also cut, sticks, cuts, subsidies to the fossil fuel industries. I mean, right now we think, oh, it's going to cost so much to do. We've got to provide carrots. Well, we're already providing carrots to the fossil fuel industry. Europeans have been paying, you know, when I was over there 20 years ago, I mean, they were paying $6 a gallon.
So, having been in a Senate staffer for 7 years, I'll just make this observation. The federal government can only do things when you have half of the House of Representatives, depending on the mechanism you're using, half or 60 of the 100 senators, and the president all pulling in the same direction. I think the IRA represented a moment in time where we could get 50 senators that were interested in moving forward, and only exactly as much as we did. And the House of Representatives and the president were on the same page. What could or would have more been done, including the kind of things you are advocating for. If there was a different makeup of the US Senate, yes, but that was the best deal we could get with the folks that were there.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, another one from the chat, maybe.
Oh. Have you had much interest from other states, nations, in learning about Minnesota's implementation of these programs? Any whispers of other countries pursuing something similar? There is a strange amount of international chatter at the academic and at the state and at the federal level. So yeah, everybody's kind of looking at everybody else. So, and trying to learn. You know, there are a lot of countries that are doing their own way of moving this clean energy transition forward, and it really is happening everywhere. I'll point out that there was an interesting op-ed in the New York Times last week with data pointing out that the world's biggest installer by far of renewable energy right now is China. So they're doing it their way. Europe is doing it their way, which is closer to the way we're doing it. We're actually bickering some about the approaches, but the progress is happening most everywhere.
Okay, let's go to Terry. Hand up. Terry, unmute yourself.
Okay, hi. I wanted to ask, I'm trying to do a decarbonization of my own home, and I started last August. I actually changed my gas stove to a induction cooktop and convection oven. I changed my gas furnace, or my gas water heater to a heat pump, and my gas dryer to heat pump. Two questions.
Awesome. You're
First
doing
of all,
a lot.
I know. So my question is, can I take advantage of any of those for the things I did last year, or that's in the past and it's too bad? So
no,
sad.
But you get credit in my esteem. You get karma points.
Well, there's a second part.
These are only for forward in the future actions.
Okay, well then going forward, I have a 21-year-old furnace that I'm hoping will last until I can do a changeover. I would like to go. I can't get geothermal to work in my backyard. I don't have. I've got between my garage and tree and retaining wall, it doesn't work. However, I would like to look into, or I'm kind of been thinking about a cold climate air-to-air heat source heat pump. And I'm just not, I haven't quite seen anybody who's been doing that for the whole house. It's a ducted system. So I would, is that something I can take advantage of? What would I use?
Yes, there are tax incentives. If you meet the income requirements, there will be these federal rebates I've mentioned, and you can stack on top of that. There will be a state rebate program. There are a bunch of things that can help with going the heat pump route, if that works for you financially and if that makes sense with your house.
When do you think that might be available?
So the tax credits are already available. The federal rebates and the state rebates will be rolling out in the next few months.
Okay. And then one other thing, I just as an aside, I work for Minnesota State colleges and universities in their facilities department. So I've got 54 campuses, and hopefully we can take advantage of more of this.
There are so many opportunities, both at the state and federal level. I'll just call out that we have solar programs that will help, that you guys should be thinking about. And because of the direct pay options, these federal tax credits are going to be something you should really be looking at.
Yeah, we're excited about it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pete, you want to take that red state question? Can you?
Can you just read it to me?
Where'd it go here? I lost it. Oh, well, I'm finding it. Tim, do you want to? You've got questions, I'm sure. Anything for you?
Yeah, I had a couple about the rebates, but I know that the details are still coming. But for instance, if a person's trying to figure out if they're qualified for these rebates, do you count your full Social Security income or just the taxable part?
I'm going to have to say, wait till we get officially vetted by our lawyers information up as we roll out these programs.
Yeah, because a lot of us will have to wait until we know, so we can't do anything this year, I guess. So,
right.
And you said twice. You said probably 2024, and you just said in a couple of months. Are you still thinking 2024?
So I think the federal rebates, since we don't have the guidance out yet, and the money hasn't started to flow. I mean, it has in a very limited sense. If we want to get into technical details, it's going to be a little while. We can't actually start in real earnest the next steps for us on the federal rebate program until the federal government does some additional actions.
Yeah,
so I don't know for sure.
I'll ask one last question. I heard the state's getting about $74 million for the 2 parts of the rebate program. How long do you think that will last? Like a year? That's a 10-year program, but that's not much money.
Yes, it is not. It does not scale to the full demand. That is definitely true. Some states are rejecting their money. Like, well, one state has. Florida is not going to take their share, so that will be redistributed to the states that are going to take it. So that will help us a little bit. But yeah, this is part of why we are looking into: are there ways to use things like the new state green bank and the DOE loan authority and take advantage of some of these tax credits to leverage a further expansion of this activity? Because you are right. It's 150 million between the 2 programs. Sounds like a lot, but if you sit back and do the calculation of the need, it's not.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tim. That question, Pete, on this, the one I mentioned, was noting that many of the major investments in clean energy manufacturing are heading to red states at this time. Can you please comment on how Minnesota's new legislation may be helpful in attracting this type of new investment to our state?
So partly the State Competitiveness Fund is intended to help with that. Partly bringing out the loan office to make sure folks understand the things that are available within the state is part of the effort there. DEED, another Minnesota department, has something called the Forward Fund. So yes, there are efforts going on in the state to take advantage. You are correct that in terms of who's out the gate quickly with big sort of manufacturing and battery plant sort of things, there has been a concentration in red states. That's just a fact. It also shows that your politicians don't have to vote for something for you as a state to take advantage of it. So, but yeah, it's something Minnesota is going to have to wrestle with: is what makes sense for us and how do we want to move forward? So,
yeah. Terry, did you have another question, or is your hand just not down? Okay.
And I'm going to need to call it quits here in a couple minutes. So,
Chris, one more question here. Your hands up.
I have it in the chat. Are there IRA funds for coaches to walk applicants through their optimal decarbonization paths and logistics to maximize the use of IRA credits and rebates to help them implement those plans?
So here at Commerce, we're working on that on a variety of levels, both directly and with our partners, like CERTS, which I've mentioned, and other state partners, trying to act as navigators and capacity builders for individuals, but also for towns and tribes and other groups. But yeah, the figuring it all out, it's a all hands on deck effort for the community, and I hopefully including the one I'm talking to tonight, trying to figure out how to get the word out, how to make sure everybody has the best chance to understand what's available to them and what makes sense. So it's a huge task.
It's like everybody, each individual or each group working on this almost needs a bit of a flow chart for themselves, of steps, first step, second step, third step, and what to do at the same time, what to do ahead of time, where you need a permission, where you can just go do something without permission. All of that, so you don't make a mistake and screw up and then get pissed off and elect the wrong person in the next election cycle.
Well, I won't go there, but yes, it's an all hands on deck. Hopefully the entire community of people who are interested in the clean energy transition are trying to find ways to help out, and including to help people and local governments and state governments and companies figure out the ways to best take advantage of the incentives.
Well, it to me, it's an example too of organizations like MRES that have been around over 40 years trying to help people do this type of thing. So, well, Pete, thank you so much. Jack, thank you so much. And Pete, I don't want to tie you up. We really appreciate your time and everything. Sorry about the tough start there in the beginning.
No problem.
But any final closing comments?
Just thanks for having me out tonight. This has been fun, and we should keep talking. So. We'll
definitely plan on doing that. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Take care.
MRES people will be meeting in a board meeting in about half an hour. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.
And I wanted to say thank you from someone who hasn't participated with you before, but this was really helpful. So thank you. This is Mike Overend.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. I mean, it's been. I just felt so lucky when we were able to get somebody of Pete's caliber to share this with us. And there's so many things that are going on. It's hard to get a handle on it. So. But I really liked the way he presented it, so that's good. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you'll make the recording available.
Yeah, we definitely will.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Take care.
Yep. You too.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Hello, this is Mike Overend.
Hi. This is actually, strangely, that's my brother's picture, not mine. But anyway, I'm Charles Hathaway. I'm from Grand Marais, and I was just I was hoping to get back and be able to tune into this earlier. So I'm very interested in looking at the recording. How would a person find out that that recording is available and how to access it? I think nobody's talking here, or perhaps Mike Overend is muted. But
well, anyway. I'm sorry. Sorry, I was trying to answer my phone.
Oh, I see.
Doing too many things at once. Is this Mark?
Yeah.
And you're in Grand Marais?
Yes, it's actually Charles, but somehow the machine's confused here and thinks I'm my brother, but,
Okay.
but it's okay.
So it's Charles Hathaway?
Correct.
All right, and you're in Grand Marais.
Yes.
And I'm in Two Harbors. And this is the first time I've been on this with this group, but I believe that they'll probably send out an email that has a link to the recording. That's what they usually do. So if you RSVP'd for this, or maybe you didn't have to, I suppose.
No, I think I did, because I had an appointment on my calendar and it looked like one of those appointments that from an automated or from an email, you know, kind of automated.
Yeah. Probably need to go to the Minnesota Renewable Energy Society's website in a day or two and see if they can make the recording available.
Okay.
That's my guess.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I haven't met you before, but it's a pleasure to meet you. And we're my wife and I are part of the leadership for the Citizens Climate Lobby that covers all of Congressional District 8.
Great.
So if you are ever interested in more information about that, which links in pretty nicely with what we listened to tonight, we'd be happy to talk with you about that.
Yeah, great. I had heard good things about shoot, now I forget his name, the fellow who's speaking tonight, and so I was interested in hearing what he had to say.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, if I can give you my phone number if you're ever interested in chatting more before they hang up on us on this line.
Right.
My phone is 218.
Hang on, one second. Give me one second.
All right.
Okay, 218
591 2514.
2514, Mike Overend. Okay.
Yeah. So just if you ever want to chat about this, we're trying to do our best to spread the word about this, and we just think that there's many, many great opportunities, and one of them is that we'll eventually want to do is bring this information to the school district up in Cook County.
Yeah.
Because they can put solar on their schools, and maybe somebody's already doing that we don't know of, but if there isn't, we'd love to help.
That would be great. Yeah, and I'm not sure if there's anybody on that, but I've also seen all this stuff about Solar for Schools program and incentives for doing that, and I would love to see that happening up here. So even I mean, I was looking at the school situation here, and there's even places you could put ground-mounted solar adjacent to the school at some really nice sort of south-facing slopes.
Yeah.
So,
well, basically, they can with what he was talking about with the IRA, plus what they did at the state legislature. I'll give you examples that Duluth schools can get 100% off solar on their schools.
Wow.
Lake Superior, Two Harbors School District can get about 85% off of solar, which is it's too good to pass up. So, anyways, if you're interested in that kind of action with your school district, just please talk to me more, and I'll be happy to share the information.
Yeah, that'd be great. The other the one more thing is I am you're aware they have this thing, the Fisherman's Picnic up in Grand Marais, and I'm hoping to be able to present information on the IRA at the DFL booth. I contacted the guys who were running that and said, you know what, this is a big deal. It was promoted by Democrats, and it wouldn't be a bad thing to sort of, it's sort of in a way a boost for the DFL. I mean, I'm not approaching this really so much from a partisan standpoint, but it's like, well, it's a feather in their cap that this thing exists and more people should know about it. So they said,
absolutely.
Yeah, if you wanted to come and try to, present information or, talk to people about it at the booth there, you'd be more than welcome. So I am looking for any kind of resources or presentation material that could be appropriate for that kind of setting. So if you have anything any thoughts on that or
what are the dates? What are the dates, Charles?
It's the first full weekend in August. So it's like 4th, 5th, 6th, or something like that. I can't remember what the exact dates, but it's right around there. It's coming up in a couple of weeks.
4th, 5th, 6th. Okay. I think I'm available. So to make a long story short, my wife and I probably would be eager to jump at that. And yeah. Can I ask you to call me about it tomorrow?
Yeah. Yep. That'd be fine.
And I'm going to be busy in the early morning, but anytime after 11 o'clock should work.
Okay. Yeah. It'd probably be the afternoon for me. So.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
I'll give you a call. We can talk more about it.
Yeah. Very, very good. And I think that'd be a great opportunity. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. You're welcome. Well,
all right.
Looking forward to seeing the recording. Hopefully that comes out. And thanks for participating. Thanks for taking my call.
Oh, well, thank you for talking. So anyways, and whoever's on Minnesota Renewable Energy there, can we ask if we'll be able to get the recording from you guys by going to your website?
They might have actually dropped off.
Maybe.
They don't seem to be muted, but.
Yeah, anyways, I think we'll probably just have to sign off here, but I'll look forward to talking with you tomorrow. If you just give me a call.
Sounds good, Mike. We'll talk.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye. That's a good news.